She was a very happy child. Heidi was a very happy, easy child, and she was the oldest of 4, so I had 3 boys after her. And she loved being a big sister. I can't say she was totally the full motherly type. She actually fit right in with them when she got older and was, I guess you could kind of say tomboyish, but very feminine at the same time. And my husband had an airsoft business for 3 or 4 years when they were teenagers, and she was the best shooter, and everybody wanted her on their team. So we have pictures of her, shooting a gun, an airsoft gun, safe but realistic kind of looking thing. So she was competitive. She was a jokester. She loved to joke around as she got older. As a child, though, she was very easygoing. And I remember putting her to bed. It usually was me that would put her to bed and read a story to her, and my husband would read to the boys. And she always wanted me to hold her hand to fall asleep. So we would do that. So that's one of my fond memories, putting her to bed, reading to her.
She was the first one that we had, and I recall times of just always, running around. She was Daddy's girl, I thought, and Mommy's too, both. And we had a lot of fun together as a family. We didn't make a lot of money, but we stayed together. We were close-knit, and I was there in their lives. She was just always fun. We were always laughing and just spending a lot of quality time together as a family, going on trips and doing things fun together.
She passed away in 2020, just before the lockdown, and I resolved that I had to turn her terrible death from fentanyl into the good. So I am telling her story wherever I can, and I'm here today to tell it to you all. She definitely, going into adolescence, shifted to be more, I don't know if I'd say emotional, just not like all the pictures. If you talk about the pictures, more serious and not always happy, but not like miserable either. I remember when she must have been probably I think she was 15, her saying to my husband and I something along the sorts of, you guys are good parents, and, none of your kids are doing drugs, and something as if the way she said it was like, I will never do drugs, kind of, but she didn't say I will never, but it was so like positive and, like that's not going to happen. So that's a memory of mine going back, and yet it shifted. It did shift. And a lot of the stuff we found out later, which is probably true of others too, you don't know everything at the time. She would go out of the window with her friends at times, escape through her window of her room. We have an old house with old windows, but, you could definitely get out. There weren't screens on all the windows. So that's one of the things I've heard more in retrospect that we didn't know she did. Not like all the years, and nothing terrible happened with that, thank goodness, but definitely showed her independence. And I remember at one point, I think probably she was around 16, didn't go in her room normally, but I did find a marijuana pipe. And I really, to be honest with you, was very ignorant of drugs. Didn't really want anything to do with knowing about drugs, and never had touched them myself, was never a smoker or alcohol, alcohol, none of that was even in my childhood or my adolescence either. But I did know what it was, and I was like, oh, wow, so she's smoking pot.
I remember with the drugs, she started with marijuana smoking. And there was no problem with that to her or to her friends, because marijuana is not a gateway. We'll never do anything else but that. And this just wasn't the case. And it was, and I believe that when someone smokes, it's not enough. They want something, that gets old smoking marijuana. They want something different. So they go on to different things. So it's definitely a gateway. I've had arguments with people about this, telling me it's not a gateway at all, and it truly is a gateway. It gets to a point where, all right, this isn't good enough. What's next? And then the devil likes to come along and say, try this and try that.
So she was definitely doing marijuana. She definitely dabbled into, I call it dabbling, and cocaine. And again, this was found out more after she passed away. So in high school, she was nothing abnormal until her senior year. Halfway through her senior year, she began to just not even be home, not just on weekends. We didn't know where she was. Not just on weekends. We didn't know where she was. We didn't know where she was during weekdays. So she skipped out of most of her last semester and therefore was not going to graduate. So that was when the biggest issues showed up with her. Getting towards the end of the year, her counselor contacted me. Thankfully, I picked up, and she said, this is the last day your daughter can enroll for summer school to still try to graduate late. And she had moved out. Heidi had said, I'm moving out when I'm 18. Here's another thing. She said, when I'm 18, I'm moving out. So that was one of the more overt ways of saying, I'm getting out of this situation. I'm getting out of here. So that was, not that she said it a billion times, but she said it more than once. So when she did turn 18, she wasn't out, and she was born in April, and school's over in May, right? May to June, whatever it was that year. So, of course, I would never have expected her to move out till at least she graduated. But when she was still home even after that, and she was with this boyfriend and, already being independent, not listening to us at all. I remember the one day saying, well, you told me you were going to move out at 18. But we did this with the counselor. We did this letter. My husband and I were instructed, because we wanted to do it the best way we could, to sit her down and kind of say, shape up, or by the way, your Aunt Lori will take you in Tampa. You can go live with her. So we sat down and we read this letter. We love you. It started off positive and then moved into it. And she actually years later thanked us for that and told her friend that we did that very well, which is interesting. So, but I can say we weren't always together on things, but that was one thing we did right, and she noticed that. So she did move in with this other guy, but she did enroll. I got her on the phone because I knew where she worked in Winn-Dixie, and I went down there, picked her up, brought her to the school, which was very close. We enrolled her in summer school, and she ended up hugging me and the counselor and saying thank you, that we went out of our way, even though she was like that. She did her summer classes with the guy she was living with, and then she did move in with my sister and finished online and was able to graduate late that summer. So, but that, all of that was really where she became difficult, was that last year.
You don't think it's going to happen to your kids, and the way you've grown up with them and showed them the way, and then they, somehow you're not thinking they're going to go into drugs. And, I think it could have been painkillers that Heidi started with in Tennessee. But she, just kept going. But you don't know, and then you find out. You never expect it.
She ended up getting a boyfriend named Tyler, I don't know, maybe a year into living over in Tampa when we were in Newport Richey, which is about a 45-minute drive, right? And he drank alcohol, but we didn't know how bad. She was very serious with him. She ended up moving in with him. And not far after moving in with him, he ended up in the hospital with a split liver. He went into a coma, and he died. And he was at the age of 27 at the time. And I didn't even realize they were that far apart because she was about 21. something like that, 20 or 21 at this point. So I realize now that I'm all about grief support, and I lead a grief support group here at my church, and I coach now more with a grief specialty. But it took me, I don't know, a year or so ago to realize that grief was really a part of my daughter's story. I believe it was part of her downfall, was that she lost that boyfriend, because she told me we weren't close, but one of the things she told me, because she moved back in with us when he went into the hospital because she couldn't afford the rent. And she told me, Mom, I don't know if I could ever love someone as much as I love Tyler. So then she realized later, once she got with her boyfriend, that, she loved him more in the way of a male-female relationship, and that Tyler was more like a brother to her. But it was this huge thing for her to, we know so many people, they're alcoholics, that lived still to be old, and here he dies at 27. He was doing hard liquor every day, I guess. And it was definitely the cause of death was the alcohol. So I believe that was a huge part of where things went down. So she stayed faithful to the end. I drove her over to see him at the hospital, and it really hit her. But her way of reacting was to 3 days later find Matt, who was somebody who she went to high school with and knew. But she found him, and they went on a date and got pregnant with Annabelle, which was her first child. And so she sat me down the one day before we went to go get some of Tyler's stuff in Tampa, and she said, Mom, sit down. And I'm like, what? I got to go to the bathroom. And I went to the bathroom thinking, why is my daughter telling me to sit down? That's usually the parent telling the child to sit down. Oh, no, what's coming? And but she sat me down. She said, Mom, I'm pregnant. And she had said before that she didn't want to have children. And yet she was smiling, and she definitely told me later, of course, that she was very happy to be having a baby. And then I do remember her telling me, and it's definitely a reflective comment that I didn't take lightly, but hit you more years later, that she said, Mom, if it weren't for Annabelle, I wouldn't be here. So they moved in together kind of the old-fashioned way, to have a baby together and see if they loved each other and see if it would work, and they fell in love even more, her and Matt, and began to have more babies after that. And they ended up having 4 as well. But part of that moves into them moving to Tennessee. So that's when things shifted too. They moved to Tennessee, and part of it was because they wanted to live on this kind of hippie-type commune place. And they would be able to live there for free, and so forth. So that was, I would say, part of the shift. They were avid marijuana smokers, preachers of it. Not that I tried to argue with them. I didn't agree, but I didn't argue with them either. But they just always would go on about how okay and fine marijuana was. So that's all they did, and that's the way she put it. That's all they did, and that's all they would do. But there was cocaine being done and dabbling, whatever, in the midst of this. But they moved to Tennessee, and we thought that we were going to move to Tennessee. We wanted to move to Tennessee. I had always hoped maybe we'd live in Tennessee. So we were like, fine, go to Tennessee. We'll be joining you eventually. We'll be joining you. We didn't know when, but, we're like, we'll be joining you. We love Tennessee. Hey, great. We didn't fight them with it. So they did stay at this place that, was outside, and I forget what they all slept in, but whatever. Or buses, like hippie buses and stuff. And then, but they did get a mobile home, but it was with the help of this church. Now, this pastor and his wife or whoever went out to this place and would do Bible studies, I guess you would call it, there, and they would attend. Through that, they made friends, and I was praying for this, that they would find Christian people, and they helped them financially to get the mobile home and finally get stable. And so they had this about a year into it, and throughout this time, I could see the pattern with him of he'd get a job and then something would upset him, or he'd mess up in some way and he'd lose it. That happened down here, and it also took place up there. It's one of the patterns. And so, but I went to visit him one time up there, and then basically she lost the kids to foster care in the summer of 2019. So I didn't know. She didn't call me. She didn't even call me and tell me. She told her brother, her youngest brother, who was the most impacted by Heidi's death. And he told me, he messaged me and told me that she lost the kids to foster care. I still don't know that full story. She took a pill and then she admitted it to the cops, but what happened is they got a van in Kentucky, and she was driving it back, and it was late at night, and the kids were in the car. I guess Matt was sleeping to get ready for work, and she stopped at a gas station and got a scratch off, because she would do that sometimes, and she started nodding off, and somebody saw this. The kids were in the car, and she was sitting outside on the side or whatever, and somebody saw it and reported her, and so the cops came out, and she admitted this pill, but she might have told me what the pill was. It's one of those things I won't know now, but they took the kids right then, so they saw enough reason for it to see neglect. They accused her of neglect. I don't know if I know the whole report, but so the 3 got taken like that, and she was already, of course, devastated, and she was like messed up, but then messed up on what else? But I mean, for losing her kids. So whatever they were doing at that point, I won't totally know. And so we went on, decided to go on vacation in August. So when we went up there, we saw the kids on a visit, because she, of course, got 1 weekly visits. So, and when we got she had called my dad to get money, and my dad gave her money, and we had talked about this, but he didn't tell us he was giving it to her. We thought she went off and paid rent, or no, actually, she was supposed to pay her, partly her lawyer, and found out that never happened. But anyway, as soon as we got there to see the kids, they took off to go pay this bill, which was weird. Why would you take off during the visit? And she was very thin. She was thinner than normal. She looked terrible, but she didn't look healthy, even at that point. So we visited the kids, got to visit them, I think, twice that week. And anyway, it goes into, I went up there by myself that next November to see the baby, because now in the midst of this, she had her 4th child. She was pregnant. And they didn't take the baby automatically. However, they figured with that, it was only if she messed up. So it wasn't an automatic, like, we're taking the baby as soon as he's born situation with the law. I don't know all of those little details, but so she had the baby, and I planned a November trip, partly to celebrate the youngest other boy's birthday, and had a van. Now, in the meantime, she was actually reaching out to me more than normal over those months. So long story short, she was reaching out to me. She was opening up. She knew it wasn't a good relationship with her boyfriend. She admitted verbal abuse. I knew he was a split personality, but she talked even more about that he was split, and it was due to drugs. And he would be all nice, and then she would see the shift, and she'd be like, "Oh no, don't leave me. Nice Matt," if you want to say it that way. So she... And I engaged with conversations with him in the background. It wasn't healthy, and she was more admitting it, and she said she should leave him. But I remember the day she just said, "He's not going to let me go," and just stopped that whole thing. But I still went up there. She had every opportunity to leave him with the baby and go with me being there, so I gave her that opportunity. I don't have regrets because of that, but I didn't push her because she was so independent. You couldn't, no. I'm like, I think of that. I think, well, I could have said, "Heidi, come on, he's at work." I didn't even suggest it. And I don't regret that I didn't, because of her person. Like, even though she was sweet to most people, she was very strong-willed to me, and she had no problem opposing me, put it that way. But she was trying to work on our relationship at this point, and I was trying to be there in whatever way I could. And that week I could write a whole book on the good things that happened that week and the really disturbing things. And I know drugs had to be involved more than I realized. So that was my last time I saw her. I left her to go fly home at an early morning flight, and she let me sleep in her bed and woke up and her boyfriend, her, was wide awake and the baby was in her arms. And we didn't always hug. I mean, when she was little, we did. But I mean, ever since she became changed and adolescent, we didn't hug a lot. But I wanted to hug her goodbye. And she wouldn't even say, Mom, lean over, or give the baby to her boyfriend who was awake, or any of that. There was no, even effort to hug me. And I was really angry about that. And I also had a feeling when I woke up earlier that they stole or they did something to my stuff, and I left the fob out. It wasn't that. We went to lunch the day before that, and I left my credit card out. And I ran outside to get something from the car, I think for her, whatever, doesn't matter, and came back in. Well, in that meantime, she took a picture of my card. And it wasn't until I got home that I did get a call, from my bank saying, we think you were frauded, or whatever the word is. And I confronted her 2 days later. And that was I always hid. I wasn't totally myself with her because I didn't want to argue with her. I didn't want to fight with my daughter. So we didn't engage like some mothers do. A lot of mothers do. We didn't engage. And it was so, but what I did more and more, especially with all this going on, I would hide. I wasn't really being me, fully me. I didn't feel like I could be me. So the day that I confronted her, I finally came out. And I was, self-controlled, but I was firm. And I said, Heidi, if you don't do something to change, because I confronted her about the card, and she just said, yeah, I paid my bill with it. She wasn't really sorry about it. And I said, if you don't do something, I think I mentioned jail. I knew death wasn't as real to me as a possibility. But I said, you've got to change. You've got to change. You've got to, I don't know if I used the word repent or whatever. I was just you got to do something. This is not good. She ended up in jail in February, the end of January of 2020. Was only in for a month and a half. She didn't mention bail, so I didn't think there was a bail. What happened is she took cocaine back when she was with her boyfriend. I guess it was January, whatever, somewhere in there. She did cocaine, trying to feel better from a flu, trying to get energy back from a flu is what she told me once I talked to her. I was so sick, Mom. I was so sick. Of course, I didn't get called and told this. Matt went and bought cocaine for her and gave her cocaine. And then she not only did that, she breastfed the baby with the cocaine in her system. They were already getting random testing from DCS. And so so she breastfed the baby. So this pastor, in the meantime, knew they were on something, didn't know what, something serious, found me on Instagram, said, I got to find somebody in the family. They got to do something about this. Told me, I called the caseworker on this Friday, late in the day, and told her that he contacted me. He says this. I'm just giving you what he said. And she goes, okay. She hangs up. I tell the foster mom, if you end up getting the baby, please let me know. She ends up telling me I got the baby on Monday. And I call the caseworker, and she says, yes, we did a drug test that day. Because I called, they did a drug test. And the baby had cocaine in his hair. So that was the Haley's Act law that was not the reason why she got brought into jail, but it was another thing that was supposed to keep her in. And he also, being a guilty party, but he didn't get caught the way she did. I don't know. Doesn't matter the whole story. So what happened is she said, Matt's going to put himself into jail and then bail himself out with our income tax return money. So I knew that was going to happen this week, particular week of the last week of February. And then his mom calls me on Thursday, and she's freaking out because we were kind of friends, his mom and I, who lived really close to each other. And she's freaking out. Julie, he didn't just bail out himself. He bailed out Heidi. And I right away, oh my God, I start freaking out. And I had the worst, this is what I share in my story, I had the worst gut feeling I've ever had in my life. Terrible gut feeling. Didn't know mentally what that meant, but this is really bad. And so I got really upset, got off, called my friend, my best friend, prayed with her, calmed down some. As soon as I got off the phone, Heidi calls me. Heidi had a deep voice like me. So I knew when she was high on marijuana or other things because her voice would go up. And so she calls me, "Hi, Mom," and her voice is up. And I said, "Heidi, I know you're taking something." And I'm just like, oh my God. And she had told me in jail that she knew she should never be with him. She had told me, I'm not going to be with him again. I cannot be with him. So yeah, anyway, we had our longest conversation that day. We talked on and off for 3.5 hours. I hung up on her at one point. We kept talking. I asked her if she knew that a popular hip hop artist, Toby Mac, actually had lost his son to a fentanyl overdose. And she said, "Yeah, I know about that." Acted like she wouldn't have anything to do with fentanyl. So I actually mentioned fentanyl that day. And her dad and her had a similar occasion the next night. And in the middle of the night, they were partying. I don't know if they were taking fentanyl the whole time. But in the middle of the night, Saturday night, is when she overdosed. So I wake up on Sunday morning and look at my phone, and I see 3 missed phone calls from Tennessee, and I know it's a 6-1 in area code, I'm hoping Matt bought her a phone, and that's her. And so I waited till after church, though, to call back. So I go and call that number, and a woman answered. It's the phone call you never want to get as a parent. She said that your daughter overdosed on cocaine laced with fentanyl, was flown to a Nashville hospital, and is unconscious and extremely non-responsive.
I had talked to her the night before, and we were talking about general things, and we were talking about God, too, and Jesus, which was important. And she ended up, we had a nice talk, and, there was a plan being made. But to my understanding now, that she was under the influence while we were talking of cocaine and what have you. So, but it ended with you're going to get help. You're going to, pull through with what you're going through. Because she had gotten her kids taken away from cocaine being in her breast milk, and then, so, that Sunday, I think it was after church, we got the call from the hospital, and it wasn't positive. So it was almost unbelievable. You never want to get that call that your child is holding on for dear life and dying.
So we found out through that phone call, and we went as quick as we could to Tennessee. My husband and my oldest son and I borrowed his girlfriend's car and drove all night to get there, because they had said they were going to chill her body. They had chilled her body to try to stop the damage. We'd be warming it back up the next day. And so we were trying to get there, as quick as we could. And when I went in and saw her with all the tubes connected to her, and her body very swollen, especially her upper body very swollen, her beautiful blue eyes were very pin dilated. No response. They said they just really had gotten no response at all. It did seem like her body was lifeless, but of course we still were hoping. So they started warming her body back up, and by Tuesday, the 3rd of March, they declared her legally brain dead because there was no more blood flow to her brain.
I recall as she lay there, and we'd be talking to her anyway and praying for her, I would touch her leg, because some of the things they do to get a response is they'll pinch the patient or blow in their eyes to see if they get anything, and there was nothing coming out. So I'd be rubbing her leg, and she'd actually lift up her leg, and she'd put it back down again. And I thought, oh, that's a sign, maybe maybe she's still with us. But the nurse quickly interjected and said, no, that's an involuntary response. Anything from the waist down, they can move, but it has nothing to do with the top part in the brain. Almost looked like she wanted to get up, but just her leg would come up, and I thought, oh. But no, she was mentally gone.
It all fell on me because they weren't married. So they said, we have this test, we can see if there's any more blood flow, and that if there isn't, then she will be declared legal brain dead. And so I elected for that test, and it came back that there was no more blood flow. So that was how we found out. And the only thing positive out of it was a couple of hours later, actually, I got this thought, oh my goodness, maybe she can be a donor, something good could come out of this. Because I had taught my kids to be donors, and most of them had chosen to put that. So when the lady came in to handle all that, she hands me this piece of paper, and she's smiling and saying, look, your daughter chose to be a donor. So she still had it on her record. And so we signed off on some of that too as well. And that was one of the only little thing of hope and positive I could kind of hold on to, that something good could come out of it, because her brain death was ideal for being a donor. So. And then I had to shift quickly to her children. I said goodbye to her body with the nurse taking a picture of her hand in mine and getting some lockets of her long brown hair, to then shift quickly to her children who were at the foster families who we were allowed to go and see, and they even allowed me to stay. We were there, and we got to help take care of them. So my mind was shifting to, how am I going to tell her kids? How am I going to tell her kids that their mom's no longer with us, that they'll never see their mom again? And because of that, I'm not a person that says you got to keep it all perfectly together, but I had to, just shift over to them. And then it became all about them, because Heidi and Matt wanted us to get them even before she died. We were going to try to get them and keep them until they got their act together, so. And that never happened. They got adopted out.
What happened to Matt?
Well, he at some point skipped town. The detective on her case in Tennessee, their law is that if anybody gets, especially knowingly, but buys fentanyl, and he knowingly bought it, and he admitted he knowingly bought it. Whereas these days we know a lot of people don't know that it's in what they're taking. So I want to clarify that, because I don't think Heidi knew. I think Heidi thought it was just cocaine, because she was doing cocaine here and there, but I'm not sure. But he knowingly bought it, and the detective on the case right away was going after it, because anybody who buys it and gives it to somebody and they die in Tennessee, they go for second-degree murder automatically. So the detective was doing everything to make that happen. I gave my statement with that to confirm that we agreed, but it was really them going after him. He was on probation, so I don't know how they didn't catch that, or they weren't in touch with that. And so, however, he skipped out of Tennessee eventually, not right away, and he was wandering. But they caught him in California last July. He is behind bars. I don't know his sentence yet, but he was charged with second-degree murder. So he had a warrant for his arrest all that time. Once the grand jury met in 2021, I think it was, whatever, it doesn't matter. But once the grand jury, they actually agreed to go for second-degree murder. And so there was a warrant for his arrest. So they had told me, anytime if he does anything wrong, they're going to know. So whatever he finally did something, they got caught in California, and they brought him back. So he is behind bars, but I don't know his sentence yet. Where my husband and I stand, and especially a father with a daughter, right? Where we stand, stood, is we're believers in Jesus, and we know the importance of forgiveness, not just because it's a command, but because we fully believe that you're in bondage if you're not forgiving somebody. So from our hearts, we have forgiven him, and we did, I would say, fairly early. And I think I'm very proud of my husband for that. But that does not have anything to do with the fact that fentanyl is so dangerous. And the more and more I learned about that after she died, because I didn't know much about it before that, the more I said, because I do share my daughter's story, and I plan to on a larger scale as I go in schools, and I'm already doing that in schools, I really wanted to be able to say that he had a consequence because of the severity of fentanyl. I thought, hey, this is my daughter's story. If my daughter's story can be part of that, then I want it. So it's not from a place of hatred or anything like that, but from a point of consequences. And I really believe that it's best for everybody, including Matt, that he's behind bars, because he had gotten clean before he met my daughter. He had been in a rehab, and he admitted he just goes to this every time. He admitted it to me. He told me he was sorry after she died. So I really believe that it's best for him, to give him the best chance of possible recovery, that he's behind bars. Not because all of this is all perfect. I'm not an idealist.
I support my wife in this. She goes to the schools and she talks to the students, and I believe she's making a great impact doing this. Well, it's aiding in the healing process. I believe healing is an ongoing thing. Like, we'll get a cut and we get a scab, and over time it heals. This is a little bit different. So it aids in that when she goes forward and does that and shares with other people. I believe she's making impact, and she knows that too.
So, we have a grief support group, and we know people, and you've been in this realm that multiple losses, right? And that's really hard. And it was for us in a different way, because it's loss to death. We'll never see our daughter again. Hope to in heaven. But of her children, who we are in contact with some, but we were told, you better get your last visit, because we don't know what we're going to do. And I tried to found out that Tennessee had a law where we could actually be the open adoption as grandparents, because our daughter was gone and Dad was out of the picture. But they wouldn't do that. So to not be able to grieve, and then to be told that I was talking too much about our daughter when I didn't even think I was over the phone visits and stuff with the grandkids. So not being given permission to talk about her with her own children. And just that was really tough. Going through COVID, y'all. This is during COVID. My world was not about COVID. It was about my daughter's death and my grandchildren. Feeling for them, loving for them, wanting to be, even though we raised kids and we were happy to be empty nesters, being willing to lay down our lives to raise 4 kids again if we had to. But then to be cut out, it was just really tough. So there's a lot I could say, but as far as the grief, you got to get it out. You got to get support. You can't do it alone. You're not alone. Don't let people shut you down, because for a while I started to get depressed. My daughter, part of why she went into drugs more was the depression of losing her children. Part of why I think she ended up with the wrong guy was because of going through the death of the boyfriend. So grief is a lot of her story. And now it's our story. And I just, I believe really strongly in the circle of control, and that's coming to me, and it's one thing I tend to share, that it's so important for us to be real about what's out of our control. The loss of a loved one, you can't change that. But you can do things to help yourself that is in your control, to work on your mental health. You'll never forget them. You're never supposed to forget them. You'll never be over them. You're not supposed to be over them. But just knowing that you can get help and learn to work through this is something in your control, and hope is still there. You can find hope again. That's something you can work on. You can be like me or not like me and others who are on this channel, that are advocates now and telling the story and fighting against fentanyl. And I'm doing that, and I want to do that. And that's part of why I'm okay today, because I didn't just sit and get depressed. And I'm that type. I don't want to go there. So I encourage you to find something you are passionate about that could even honor your loved one, because it's really important to move on and move through this. So, that's all, I guess.